The next session is a treat. It's a treat because we are seeing the future of innovation right here on the stage. So I'm very excited to welcome to the stage from the top 35 MIT innovators under 35, some real geniuses. I was looking at their bios, they're real geniuses. So first up, let's welcome Jonas, who is the co-founder and CEO of COSY. Give them a round of applause as they come out. Next up, we've got Mimi Yen, who is the co-founder and CEO of PhagePro. Join us on the stage also Will Mclean, who is the co-founder and VP of Biology, Regenerative Medicine, and Frequency Therapeutics. And finally, our moderator is Mercedes Balcells-Camps, who is the principal research scientist at MIT. Listen up, because you're sure to learn something you probably didn't know before from this discussion. And here are the top innovators who are under 35 from MIT. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Mercedes, take it off.
Thank you. Good morning. I first want to start thanking Emerge for inviting me to this panel to moderate. And I asked for permission to disclose something that nobody knows until now, is that MIT is launching a new initiative called the Global Co-Creation Lab, which I direct. And this initiative, it's about identifying local unmet clinical needs everywhere in the world and work with local communities so that we can tackle those problems that may have a global impact. So this is the new page. It has never been seen before. We finished it last night, last minute. And that's the news I wanted to share with you. And we have a focus in Latin America. And I'm very delighted to be here to work with Emerge and hope what brings next. But now back to the panel. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So you are really genius. And we have been talking a little bit on the back. And I would like to start asking you to say, why do you think MIT Technology Review has pointed you out as the people to watch of what's coming? And so, Mimi, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mimi Yen. I am the co-founder and CEO of PhagePro. So we're based out of Boston. We were a Tufts University academic startup. And our thing is all about phages, which are viruses that specifically target and kill bacteria. So just like humans have viruses like the flu that infect humans, bacteria also have specific viruses that go after them as well. So we're using this as a way to combat antibiotic resistance, especially in developing countries. So our first target is going after cholera, specifically going after the household transmission of cholera and seeing if we can disrupt that and really make an impact in reducing the burden of cholera in global health.
Oh. Jonas?
Yeah, sure. So it's exciting to be here. My company is called COSY. We are a spin out of the University of Pennsylvania. We do artificial intelligence and computer vision. The company's actually spin out of research that I did while a researcher at Penn. The way that I describe what we do is enabling machines to understand the world the way that humans do. So when we walk into this room, we know where we are, we then perceive the obstacles in front of us, we then can navigate through it, and as we're navigating through the space, we can then recognize items and objects that are around us. And so we want to enable machines to be able to do that using only cameras. We've actually identified our first market sector as retail and distribution centers where we have robots, cameras, drones that are already capturing this information. And on the cloud side, we're processing all this and making it actionable for the end user.
Will?
Sure. So my name is Will Mclean. I'm a co-founder of Frequency Therapeutics. Some of my other co-founders are Bob Langer and Jeff Karp, and it spun out of some work that I did in an academic setting throughout my PhD and postdoc. And so a little bit of background about the problem. 10% of the population has hearing loss, so the WHO estimates that 1.1 billion people are at risk. But right now there's only devices such as hearing aids and cochlear implants to treat those conditions, and only about 20% of the people that need them adopt them. So really what my work focused on was, well, how can you get biology to regenerate the inner ear? Because every species except mammals can regenerate hearing in the cells that, because loud noises kill the cells that sense sound, but every other species can regenerate hearing except mammals. And we also know that other tissues in your body are regenerative, like your intestine regenerates its lining every 5 to 7 days. So we took those kind of insights and put them together and found that we could screen for small molecule compounds or drugs, and when we apply them to the ear, you can actually get these cells to regenerate in mammals. So we've taken that from the bench about between 7 and 5 years ago, when we just finished a phase 1/2 clinical trial, where we've actually seen evidence of people improving in their hearing performance.
Wow, don't get me going, because you know you and me share a love for regenerative medicine.
Yep.
So this is amazing. I wanted to ask, what is in the environment you develop these technologies? You mentioned an academic environment. What is there? You know, what are the components, the ingredients that was nurturing enough for you to bloom like innovators in these disruptive technologies?
So in our instance, we were literally born out of the university, which I think a lot of companies or individuals that were on 35, under 35 shared a similar experience. For us, I think the university is one of the most exciting places where a company can be born out of, right? There's no other place that's doing something that is probably as pioneering and is also leveraging the resources that a startup or a couple of guys in a garage can't do normally. And so for us, you know, being able to have that backdrop of being able to have access to the research funding that we did, and then also the university's reputation, which brings in customers which you also wouldn't have access to, say if you were 2 guys or 2 girls in a garage. So we've been able to leverage that, and I think that the other piece is really being able to have a team that's product-oriented and can easily adapt. And one of the gaps that often occurs between traditionally academic folks, the community, and people who are on the enterprise side is research and innovation versus product and sales. And so being able to have people that can sort of bridge that gap, which isn't normal, is a good thing.
Very good. What about Mimi? What was your experience? What was good about?
Sure. I also came out of university, so I never thought I would be in business. So this actually came because I was trying to do the final chapter of my thesis at Tufts University, and I was working under Andrew Camilli. So I echo what Jonas has said. There's so many resources that are available at an academic setting because you're only there because of the science. You want to pursue the science. You're following your curiosity, and that's what innovation is all about, to have the freedom to do so and not be restricted by, oh, do I need to get funding to do this? Oh, we don't have enough money to explore that avenue. Whereas usually in academia, and especially in Andrew Camilli's lab, I was fortunate enough to pursue whatever I wanted at the bench, and that's how this really came about. So aside from university resources, I found that my mentorship has also played a huge role. So if I didn't have a very generous PI who was willing to cultivate that part of me, which is the entrepreneurial side, which he hadn't really explored either in his academic career, but was willing to take the dive on it and try a new path for himself, I think we wouldn't be here today.
What about you, Will?
Sure. So I think in my situation, I really benefited from being at an institution that's willing to take risks. So it actually, what is now my company and the technology, originated from a side project that was supported because MIT had this award at the time for high-risk, high-reward research that a PI might not necessarily want to back because it has a chance to fail. So I think being able to have that opportunity to be aggressive and take risk on that project was really beneficial. And then obviously once you get past those hurdles, as they've mentioned, having a support group around you, because you can be an expert in the science, but you also need to understand things like intellectual property, how to actually form a company and talk to venture capitalists or angel investors and what they look for. So I think being in that environment where that kind of naturally feeds in was really beneficial.
So can I ask you a second question? When you say about how the PI, how you convince him to take that risk? It was you going and saying, yes, this project may fail, but I want to go. What are your negotiation skills there? Because I know there is a lot of pressure, to produce papers, patents, and deliver.
Yes, right. So your PI wants to obviously use your time most valuably and get you through your PhD and have papers. But because of the funding and the support groups, so they give you also mentors outside of your lab that you can work on these projects with and seek them, so you're not pulling both monetary resources and time from your PI. So that was beneficial. And then once the project gets going and you get enough good data, then you can convince your PI that we should really keep doing this. But it was kind of that first initial support, kind of the seed that was planted to start that work and continue on that work.
Let me talk to you about, I know you are amazing individuals, but I'm sure you don't work alone. You know, you work in teams. How important is your leadership to move your projects along? Anyway.
Sure. It's incredibly important. I think all the investors always say that they invest in the team more so than the product. And I think one of the mistakes that I made starting out was that I didn't ask for help early on enough. So when we first started the company, I think I just defended my thesis, we incorporated, and all of us really didn't know what it took to take a product from the bench into the market. And I thought I had to do that all myself. I had to do all the research, I had to understand the IP, I had to understand the commercialization, I had to understand the whole product development life cycle and just rely on my ability to absorb everything really quickly and apply it. But once I found my co-founder, Matt Marigi, who is our head of business development now, everything changed. It went from something that was really stressful to all of a sudden you have a team that you could bounce ideas off of. You get the momentum and the enthusiasm going again for your product. And I think in a startup, when you have all these ups and downs, it's so important to have a team there to weather them with you, because sometimes it's hard to keep going. So having a strong team that is supportive and not combative in that manner, it really helped us push to where we are today.
I think the team, I echo that, is incredibly important, and nothing can start without a team of people. So, you know, one of the things that I think has been a journey for me has been really learning how important it is that for everyone to be in sync with regard to whatever the organization's mission is going to be and vision is going to be. And oftentimes it's one person that's, you know, working on something initially in front of their laptop, and then it becomes 2 people and becomes 3 people. And maybe, you know, a lot of times the third person who joins the team is actually the most important, the person who's willing to follow or actually buys into whatever the vision is. And then also having leadership that can be open to the criticism and the feedback to refine that vision as the organization evolves. I think that's equally as important because you never end where you began, especially when we're so, all of these things that we're doing begin with research, or begin with a spark of an idea. It's going to evolve over time.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what was said, and just thinking back, when you first make the discovery of the technology and you're moving it forward, it's kind of like your baby. But as you start to move forward, at least for our case, seeing it go through the clinical trial, I think you soon realize that you don't know what you don't know. And so that's where having people around that know a lot about IP or designing clinical trials and all the different aspects that come into actually having a product go to market, and in this case, a drug go to humans. It's important to build the team around you, so not only the team to support you in what you're doing, but the rest of the team to help cover the areas that you don't necessarily have covered.
So now I would like you to mention how long have you been working in this project to give people a sense of this is not an overnight thing, especially when you talk about health sciences and, you know, solutions for healthcare. And if you look back and said, oh, I did this mistake and I would do, you know, if you could turn the clock back, what would you do differently?
Well, I think one of the really interesting things about innovation versus entrepreneurship or scaling a venture is that innovation is really about refusing to compromise. It's about refusing to compromise until you have that breakthrough. And many times, entrepreneurship or scaling a company is very different, where it's being able to actually incorporate ideas and the evolution of the conversation as it continues. So I think if I could say lessons learned or back on the years that we've spent building out COSY, that has been one of the biggest things for me.
Mm-hmm. What about Mimi? How many years and what would you do different?
Well, the company was incorporated in 2016 in October. And I think the research behind all of it really started in about a decade ago in Andy's lab, and then I started my PhD work in 2012. But the idea of it becoming a business and whether or not we can actually commercialize it is a bit young, I would say, but with a lot of research backing it. And if I could think about lessons, I would actually echo what Jonas said, that innovation is about not compromising. And for me, I think I did too much compromising at the beginning. When I was still learning about business, I was thinking, okay, I have something that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about cholera. I'm passionate about alleviating the disease burden in developing countries using my technologies. How can we bring it to communities that need it the most? But a lot of people see a different potential for my technology. So they think there's a lot of antibiotic resistance here in the US. There's a lot of antibiotic resistance in Europe. There's this top 10 list that the CDC and the WHO put out in terms of the pathogens that they really want people to target. For me, of course, that's an incredible problem, and of course, that's where other people's efforts and the whole industry should be going. That's where we should be putting our investments in. But it didn't align with my gut instinct of where I wanted to take the company. So at the beginning, I did a lot of floundering around trying to please people, I think, in exploring all these different ideas. And ultimately, I came down and said, no, we are a company that prioritizes global health, and we're just going to have to keep going with that vision, because if we don't believe in it, then working on it and bringing it to a fruition is actually going to be that much harder.
Very interesting. What about you, Will?
Yeah, so I've been working on it all together probably for 8 or 9 years, maybe close to a decade. The company, Frequency, was founded in 2015, so almost 4 years now. So yeah, it definitely wasn't overnight. And I think in terms of the lessons learned, I think it's, or what I would do differently, I think that's a really difficult question, because some of these mistakes you make along the way are learning lessons and make you realize the decision you made and maybe the one you should have made. So luckily there hasn't been anything so catastrophic that I'd want to completely redo, but I think one thing I can say is maybe just seeking guidance earlier and more often. That's a hard thing to do, and make those connections and foster those relationships and make sure that everything keeps moving ahead, especially when you're trying to do that in parallel to doing your normal work in this case.
I share with you that. I think we are all strong individuals and we want to show we can do it, and very often I have been told, please ask for help early on. Don't go so fast, ask for help. So I share that with you. In terms of the Technology Review has had many awardees. Do you have any that has inspired you, and why?
So I actually didn't hear too much about the MIT Tech Review list until I was nominated for it. But when I got on stage there was a roundtable there as well, there was a session, and this year I think there were more women innovators on the list more than the men, and I think that was the first year that happened. And my roundtable group was full of women of color who just had incredible visions and incredible companies. So there's Barbarita Lara, who is working to have response systems happen in earthquakes when every other system is shut down. There's Elizabeth Nyeko, who is working to bring solar power to rural communities in Africa. There's Hera Hussein, who uses Chan to bring the sources for women who are suffering from domestic violence available through technology and through mobile phones. And that was the group that I was standing with, and I felt so humbled, but also so inspired by that group of women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look through the list of people over how many, 20 years or so, it's Sergey Brin, Elon Musk, it's Johnny Ive. Pretty humbling. Yeah. A lot of pressure. I think what's impressive about all those folks actually is not only that they were innovators, but actually that they were also able to build out teams and scale teams, which I think was really interesting. And one of their skill sets was always being able to identify people who could run with whatever their initial idea was, and many times make it better. It might have started with an idea in Google, but there's many more talented software engineers that have built that idea out and scaled that company, right? Easiest example. And Johnny Ive doesn't work in a room. And that's really what I admire sort of most about those folks. For me personally, Helen Grainer is probably the person that I'm most inspired by that's on TR. And she's the co-founder of iRobot. And really their story is a little bit similar to ours in that they started working on research projects, then they received grant funding, then they found commercial opportunity, but they did so as pioneers, and were still able to survive, which is pretty impressive. She for me is someone that stands out.
Yeah, I make the joke now to my friends that me and Mark Zuckerberg are the same because we both do the same work. For me, actually, it was two people that I co-founded my company with, so it was maybe more so of a inspiration through mentorship. So Jeff Karp and Chris Luce, two of my co-founders, have both won this award before, and for me, it was the inspiration really came from seeing how they have the knowledge or experience of working on something in an academic setting and the eagerness and enthusiasm to move it out of academia into a business setting where things can move more quickly and get to market. So for me, it was more of a direct mentorship.
Mm-hmm. You brought something interesting, that there is a lot of pressure on us, no? You feel you are very motivated because you know your idea is so good and it's going to help so many people, but you feel the pressure. How do you cope with pressure? What do you do? If you can say it in public.
I jog a lot, work out a lot. I think actually, it's really cool to be recognized on a list like that, but success inspires success, right? And I think everyone who has their core milestones and motivations that they're working on, and being able to hit those inspires you for the next one. And ultimately, everyone, or I can speak for myself, has a vision for what you want to accomplish, and you are hell-bent on accomplishing that. So the external pressure probably isn't as much as the internal pressure.
Mm-hmm. Mimi, how do you deal with internal pressure?
I love flaming hot Cheetos. So there's a lot in that series that I just gotta go through whenever I need a moment to myself. But I also have an incredible friend support group as well. I have been very lucky to have many circles who I can go to for different types of support. There are people who go with me to work out when I need to work out. There are people who will sit on the couch with me and watch Netflix because sometimes you just need to let your brain shut off for a little while. And there are people who will go with me to eat because I love eating. So one of the ways I de-stress is just to eat a ton of good food in the Boston area. So I think having all these different friends who are willing to listen, that has been a huge support for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, so I agree with the point that there's probably more internal pressure than external, but I think that's probably what, at least for me, has motivated me to keep pursuing this, because when you see the progress and it kind of becomes your mission to move it forward. So I think, at least in my case, I probably put more pressure on myself than I get pressure from the outside. But in terms of coping with that, I think everybody has their own way of doing it. I think in some sense it does kind of come with the territory.
Okay.
So yeah.
And the last
The scent of lavender is really calming, so.
I just started doing
Try to
that.
keep that around.
The last question, because we're running out of time, is like you have a lot of innovators in this room. What piece of advice will you share with them?
So I've recently been reading a lot of managerial books and communications books, and this theme is always coming up of not only strong communication, but actually sort of internal reflection on what it is that you want. And I think that it's incredibly important for us as people to always reflect on what we want individually, what our goals are, and also how our talents align with whatever it is that we want to pursue. And I think that's a way to find your mission, maybe your identity, and from there, innovate along that.
Yeah, I've also been reading a lot about managerial skills and team building skills. How do you set the culture within your company? What type of leader do you want to be? And I think the best piece of advice that someone gave me recently is there's so many strategies out there. There's so many different styles that you could take on. Do the one that feels most like you. So whatever worked for somebody else, even in your field, even in your same model, even for your business, that might not work for you because that's just not the way you are. And if you try to put that on yourself and have it go out to your team, it's not going to feel right. The dynamics are going to be off. So when thinking about how do you want to shape your vision, how do you want to shape your mission for the company, what type of company you want to build, it has to be something that fits with you and your personality, your values, your principles, because otherwise people around you, they're going to feel that disconnect, and that's actually not great for you or for your company.
Yeah, so I think tying back into one thing that I mentioned previously, I think one piece of advice is try to think about what you don't know and become more versed in that. So in my case, as a PhD scientist, intellectual property and patents wasn't something I was trained in. It's something I do a lot now, and it's something that's very necessary. So I think the more you can kind of understand how a company operates and at least learn a little bit about that, it can go a long way. The one other thing is just, it sounds kind of cliche, but if you're determined and you think you're right, to keep your head down and keep moving forward, because I was, discouraged several times that it might not be a good idea, or maybe I should pursue something else, but in the end I took the risk and I think it's paid off. So if it's something you feel strongly about, keep doing it.
So if I can summarize what I hear from you today is that there are a lot of unmet clinical needs that need new technologies, and that most of these, your projects, and so having a solid institution, academic institution that fosters research, but also with open mind, allowing the researcher, the graduate student in this case, to take risk and go a little bit to the side. Those mentors and those programs that allowed, to move along a project that was not hardcore, your PhD program, are centered to innovations, being able to move forward, that you have to stay loyal to what you think you want to do and how many people you are going to help. So don't try to please everybody, and that we need to stay humble to ask for help and continue learning by reading, because nobody knows it all. So if you are a scientist, you need to learn about a company, and you are going to have to work with people in the other side in the companies to understand how you bring your science forward to benefit a lot of people. Have I summarized that correctly? Am I missing something?
He's a professor at MIT for a reason.
So thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure to have this conversation, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you.
Thank you.